Hello, welcome to the Politics Chicks podcast. I'm Monica Healy.
And I'm Christy Branham.
And today we have our first return guest on the podcast. Doug Chapin has found himself unexpectedly running for office, something he says he never considered until Trump 2.0. Minnesota is fortunate that Doug stumbled into candidacy because he's wildly overqualified and just a downright decent human being. His dad jokes are kind of on point. If elected, Doug will represent Minnesota's 6th district, currently held by Tom Emmer, and I don't need to tell sane Minnesotans or Americans who pay attention how badly that seat needs to be overturned. But today we're here to talk to Doug about another capacity. A self-proclaimed election law geek, Doug is going to give us all the ins and outs of what we might be facing in the midterms.
Since Monica and I are chronically online, we see a lot of worry over two big things facing our country, the SAVE Act and election integrity. Doug is going to walk us through what we should know about both of those things, and we think you'll be relieved to hear what he has to say. So, Doug, thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate you coming back.
I'd like a bad penny. I'm happy to be back.
You're a good penny.
Glad you're turning up.
Yeah. So let's start off with a broad overview of elections in general. What do people need to know about the big picture right now? Because a lot of people have anxiety. So
yeah. The big picture in this country is that free and fair elections have been a part of this nation's history pretty much since the founding. While the right to vote has expanded and unfortunately sometimes contracted over time, elections have been a key part of how this nation governs itself. And unlike a lot of things that started 200 plus years ago, elections still hold up pretty well. We have a system that is run pretty much at the state and local level across the country. It's state officials who are responsible for setting the rules and the procedures, and it's local officials who are the ones who actually put those plans into motion on and before Election Day. The federal government has an oversight role, does things like make sure that civil rights laws are obeyed or that certain basic principles are respected. But by and large, it's states and localities that run the show. Unfortunately, right now, we have a White House that seems bound and determined to assert and really overgrow the federal role in elections. And so I think what people need to be paying attention to in the run-up to Election Day 2026 is not so much the rhetoric that they're hearing, but the nuts and bolts of registering and getting a ballot and casting a ballot and making sure it was counted. The system works, even though I think it's going to be a little bit scary in 2026.
Well, that sort of brings me to the whole election integrity thing. And as we're recording this, yesterday, Trump signed his big executive order, which he wants to proclaim as law, even though executive orders are not law. And he's mandating a national voter roll and putting severe limits on mail-in ballots, even though just a couple weeks ago, he himself submitted a mail-in ballot. So talk to us about that part, about his power, the executive power.
Yeah, I like to joke that every time the president issues an executive order about elections, I like to remind people that I, too, have a standing order banning lima beans from coast to coast in America. That's just as enforceable as what the president is trying to do. The president is trying to muddy the waters. He is trying to make the case that certain states, blue states, are somehow gaming the voter rolls, and therefore the federal government needs to take a stronger role in ensuring that those voter rolls include only eligible voters and, most importantly, only citizens. The problem is that the Constitution doesn't give the federal government that power. And as most secretaries of state across the country have told him, Republicans and Democrats basically butt out. You can ask for it, but you can't have it. And you can tell us to give it to you, but we're not going to. This is really just kind of the same bad meal warmed up again in an effort to get people focused on his inability to do other things, both at home and around the world. But it's yet another example of a president who either doesn't or more likely refuses to understand the limits on federal power.
We've already seen a couple states, put in some litigation about this, but this is going to gum up the works. Like everything else he does, he's the king of litigation, and it's to slow everything down. But given the clarity of this in the law, do you see this really being a problem or for how long?
I see it less as being a legal problem or even a procedural problem. Basically, what states like Minnesota and Secretary of State Steve Simon have said is, no, we won't give it to you. And basically, that changes nothing. We're going to continue running elections the way we always have. So in terms of interfering with the ability of states to manage their elections, it really won't do anything. The problem, and as you all mentioned, since you're online like I am all the time, is that it creates fear. It creates doubt. And for whatever reason, this administration has successfully convinced even really kind of smart, resourceful people that it's somehow all powerful. I can tell people that the president won't cancel elections in this country. And I've got people saying to me, oh no, if he didn't obey that law, he won't obey this one either. This is really more about striking fear into voters' hearts than it is getting hold of voter rolls across the country.
Which is real. That fear is real, and the intimidation
Absolutely.
that will keep people from the polls. And you just posted this morning about vote anyway,
Right.
and the importance of that.
Yeah, I talk all the time that the most powerful weapon that every single eligible American has is their vote. That vote is what politicians want. It's what some politicians fear. It's people talk about the obscene amounts of money that are spent on campaigning or independent expenditures or other ads across the country, but all of that billions of dollars is spent in service of either getting or preventing your vote. And the only person who can take away your power to vote really is you. And so what we're telling people starting now, 216 days until election day, is be election ready, know how to register, know how to check your registration. When the time comes to cast that ballot in November, do it. And if we get to the point where the margins are big enough, no amount of fear, no amount of intimidation, no amount of claims of cheating is going to make a difference. I mean, as our friends in Canada say, elbows up. I think it has to be elbows up between now and election.
Yeah. And now let's dig into the SAVE Act and why it's so polarizing. And because the right-leaning posts on social media deride opposition to this act. They say, why can't you just show your ID? You show your ID to buy beer. Tell us how it really works and why it's not the same thing.
Well, the first thing is that you show your ID to buy beer or board a plane or enter a federal building or many other things. That's to show your age, your identity, your residence, that sort of thing. The thing that all of those things have in common, none of them are constitutional rights. I can think of a few places in the country, even Wisconsin, where buying beer is not a constitutional right. Voting is, and you cannot condition exercise of a constitutional right on being forced to obtain something like an ID. People talk about poll taxes all the time. Poll taxes aren't metaphorical. There was a time post-Civil War and in the Jim Crow South where voters, usually voters of color, literally had to pay in order to register to vote. Now, very often they were then frustrated by some bizarre literacy test that would then disenfranchise them. But people don't realize that there were Americans in this country who literally had to pay to vote. The Constitution now.
Or guess how many beans were in a jar.
Or how many letters are in the United States Constitution? But all sorts of nonsensical, some voters got, what's your name? Oh, that's correct. You get to vote. And others got, how many beans are in this jar? How many stitches in this flag? You name it. ID of any kind, unless it is absolutely, completely free, is a poll tax. And it's not just a monetary cost. The time it takes to gather your documents, to go to the office, to upload your documents, to pay to get it done. There are costs that involve both money and time and effort. And while the courts, including the Supreme Court, have said in theory, it's okay to require ID to vote, in practice, you can't do that if it means that people who are otherwise eligible to vote do not have access to ID. So the issue with the SAVE Act is that we're not just requiring ID, like a photo ID at the polling place, but we're actually requiring documentary proof of citizenship. Show me a piece of paper that proves that you're an American citizen, that you are not only here legally, but actually have American citizenship. The bigger issue is that that would happen anytime you either registered to vote or you change your registration. And just to give you a bizarre law school hypothetical, if you live in an apartment building and you're in apartment 305 that has a view of the alley in the back, and another apartment in your building opens up that's up on the 10th floor that has a view of the park across the street, when you go to change your voter registration with the state, under the SAVE Act, you would have to show documentary proof of citizenship, not even to move addresses, just to move 7 floors. Then stir in the fact that voter registration would be like the worst day at the DMV ever. Thousands and thousands of people registering or updating with one clerk or 2 clerks.
And who
whose
handles
job it is
that?
to apply for all of this.
And who handles that? You know, I mean, not every state has the infrastructure to be able to handle massive amounts of people coming in trying to show documentary proof that they're U.S. citizens.
Right. Yeah, there are local election offices across the country where the election office is also part of the recorder's office, or they issue hunting licenses, or they notarize deeds. So you've got people who are literally multitasking, and this notion that all of a sudden they're going to be documentary experts on citizenship is beyond absurd.
And I think what concerns me the most, and Monica's going to get into how this could arguably hurt Republicans more, but the bigger issue for me is that the ultimate decision as to whether you can be registered to vote under the SAVE Act goes to the person who is reviewing your documents. So they have final say, and you could walk up with your wedding license, you could walk up with your birth certificate, you could walk up with your ID, and they could decide that's not enough.
Right.
And that you've either going to jump through some more hoops or you're just not going to be able to register. That's what people don't understand. And that's what makes it so dangerous, I think.
Yeah, there's a concept in political science and public administration, street level bureaucracy. The people who are at the actual point of interface with citizens, who control access to the vote or to property or to other services. I can't remember if I've told this joke on this podcast. I've told it a million times, so if I have, I apologize. But long story short, a candidate is at a potluck and is walking down the line and gets to the end. There's a big bucket of chicken and a lady with tongs, and she puts one piece of chicken on his plate. And he says, you know, I've been traveling all day. I'd really love a second piece of chicken. And she says, I'm sorry, it's only one piece per person. And they go back and forth a little more. And he finally says, look, I hate to do this. Do you know who I am? I'm Senator so-and-so, and I'm running for president. And she says, do you know who I am? And he says, no. She says, I'm the lady in charge of the chicken. Right?
That's awesome.
So,
yeah.
You know, when you're the person reviewing documents at the desk, you're the man or the woman in charge of the chicken. And you're absolutely right that they are the last barrier between you getting on or being kept off the voter rolls.
And if they decide that if you are an LGBTQ person who is in a same-sex marriage and they don't agree with LGBTQ same-sex marriages, and you walk up with your birth certificate and you've changed your name to your wife or husband's last name, if they don't particularly agree with the status of your marriage, they can say no.
Yeah.
to you.
Or you're a person who's transgender, who has changed your name, and yet for whatever reason still has your dead name on your birth certificate. The picture might be very similar, but somebody could, either because of the way the law is written or just because they don't want to help you because they're the lady in charge of the chicken, might refuse your ability to register or update your registration.
With all the documentation, you could make an argument that this could hurt Republicans as much or more than Democrats. And I think congressional lawmakers in both the House and the Senate are recognizing this. And Senate Majority Leader John Thune has already said that they don't have enough votes because it would require the filibuster-proof 60 votes. Trump wants the Senate to get rid of the filibuster.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, presidents and majority leaders and others, people hate the filibuster until they're in the minority. The Senate gives outsized power to the minority, to 41 members, to frustrate lots of things. Now, we've whittled away the filibuster over time. We don't use it on Supreme Court nominees anymore. It doesn't apply to reconciliation bills. But when it comes down to garden variety legislation, which the SAVE Act is, both sides like the filibuster because it gives them an opportunity to stop things they don't agree with. So I have no doubt that people will continue to talk about the filibuster. I'd be really surprised. I certainly will be surprised if this Senate under Majority Leader Thune gets rid of it. But don't be surprised if people continue to complain about it and eventually be stuck with it.
And another thing about the SAVE Act is it calls for handing over state voter rolls. And that one has me particularly angry as a person who studied history in college. It is the state's job, according to the Constitution, to run elections, not the federal government. That is hands off. So even if this were to happen, this is just a snapshot in time where voter rolls are constantly changing, like through death, new registrations, by those turning 18, moving into another state, moving apartments in the same apartment building, changing party affiliations. So what is it that they really want with those voter rolls, do you think? Because I'm not thinking it's on the up and up.
Yeah, I think what they want is they want control over who can and can't get on the rolls. They've developed a program that supposedly can scan voter data for citizenship eligibility based on other criteria. But really what they want to do is they want to take away from states the ability to decide who is and isn't on the rolls and make that a federal prerogative. Now, the states are going to fight that like hell, both because the right is granted to them under the Constitution, but also, I will tell you, that Republicans and Democrats don't like the idea of the federal government intruding on state policy. While the Constitution has a much stronger federal government than the Articles of Confederation did, the founders still carved out a role for the states. And we thought about that for centuries, but the states still have a very important role. And so even if it weren't in the black letter of the Constitution, I think states believe that they are the better judge of who is and isn't an eligible voter, partly because of proximity and partly because they think they are the best judge of their voters' qualifications.
With the TSA having not been paid for however long it's been now, and Trump deciding to put ICE into our airports, we've heard talk about this being an attempt to normalize their presence and looking forward to them being at the polls. And clearly this is a voter intimidation tactic. And as an election law person, what is the recourse for this? And what do you see happening with it?
Yeah, well, first of all, federal law absolutely prohibits armed personnel at the polls. I mean, unless there is an actual disturbance, you can't post armed folks at the polls. And that includes police, just to keep things safe. They have to stay a certain distance away. It's a federal crime to do that. And courts are really intense about enforcing that rule. Look, this is all part of the same effort to intimidate. You know, now that we've got ICE agents at the airport, and by the way, I mean, we're all from Minnesota. Where were these folks standing around doing nothing, drinking coffee in January and February in Minnesota?
Right. Yesterday, there was a photo. I don't know what airport it was at. I think it was in California where they took a picture. TSA or Homeland Security posted it of a TSA agent handing out lollipops to kids. Good PR.
Whereas here in Minnesota, they were handing out handcuffs, apparently.
Right.
So,
right.
But anyway, look, that's the rage will subside, right? But Steve Bannon said on a podcast that ICE at airports was a rehearsal for ICE at the polls. Todd Blanche said at CPAC that he didn't really understand what's the big deal with having ICE at polling places. I don't see what the big deal is. Well, the big deal is it's illegal, it's unconstitutional, and it's undemocratic.
And I think we need to take things like Todd Blanche, definitely, because he is the assistant attorney general, but things that Steve Bannon says, we need to take those things very seriously because he is in Trump's inner circle. And while he's a blowhard and probably says things that he shouldn't, he told us exactly what was going to go down on January 6th and how it was going to go down.
Yep.
And no one paid attention.
Yep.
So I think we need to listen.
Yeah. Maya Angelou has that great line, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them. And I think that the administration has done that again and again and is doing it now in the area of elections. I know that we have to throw up our hands and be frantic about it, but I think that we as Americans, we as voters, we as state and local election officials have to essentially harden ourselves against the storm that is coming. There's that great line from science fiction that fear is the mind killer, right? We can't be afraid to do the things that we need to do, but we need to take the threat seriously. The storm is brewing. And even if it turns out that they chicken out like they have on many other things, I would rather be ready for the storm and not need it than have the storm happen and not be ready.
I think the important thing that we need to remember is that the people who think that this is hyperbolic are either delusional or they are tying themselves to the wagon of wishful thinking, because they've told us that this is going to happen. And when they tell you, when Trump is saying over and over and over again, we need to win the election or I'm going to be impeached. When he talks about the election, that is what he falls back on. I need to win or I'm going to be impeached.
Yeah, and we need to make sure that we neither deny that it's a problem. We have to acknowledge that it's coming, but I think we also can't go to the other extreme, be a nihilist or be a doom scroller and say that nothing we can do will stop it, that he is an all-powerful despot and he'll find a way to break the rules, and that yes, it is scary and we are going to have to fight, but we have agency. We as voters can actually do something about it. It won't be easy, it won't be fun, but it will get done.
And I think 9 million people showing up for No Kings last Saturday scared the shit out of the Republican Party and out of him.
I think that's a great way to take us out of this segment. So the bottom line is, as we need to be prepared for what might be coming, but your vote still matters. So get out there and vote.
Really quick, if you want a to-do list as a voter, number one, find out today how to check your registration. You can Google it. You can also go to vote.gov, which will take you to your state's page. Look up your voter registration, put in your address, and make sure that it's valid. I don't think you need to check it every month. Maybe check it again in a couple, 3 months. But the closer we get to Election Day, continue to check it. And then as we get closer to Election Day, start to think about, how am I going to cast my ballot? Where am I going to cast my ballot? When am I going to cast my ballot? The last thing you want is to be on a polling place on Election Day with an hour until polls close and find out that you're not registered, you're in the wrong place, you don't have what you need to cast a ballot. Be ready. Be like us old Gen Xers who used to literally call and check airplane reservations, right? Yeah. Make sure you're on the list before you board the polling place.
Yeah, and check and make sure you know what your polling place is, like what happened in Texas during their primary.
That's what I was just going to say, right?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to some more fun things. We didn't tell you we were going to do this, Doug, but here we go. And credit where credit is due. Tim Miller from The Bulwark asked some of his guests this question, and I'm from South Dakota, and Mount Rushmore is kind of polarizing for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the fact that it was created on a mountain that is sacred to the Lakota Sioux people. But let's pretend for a moment that we're creating something completely different. Which 4 figures are you putting on your new monument?
Wow.
We love you, Doug.
Oh, yeah. Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln understood the power of the Union and was masterful in holding it together, but also was ruthless in only the best ways in protecting it. I think Thurgood Marshall, for not only being an advocate for civil rights, but then also a powerful voice in the federal courts and then on the Supreme Court for not just civil rights, but for the rule of law across the country. Wow.
It's okay if you don't want to come up with 4.
I can't come up.
We can move on too.
I'd be good at 1 or 2, but yeah, I mean, I could go on. James Madison for writing the Bill of Rights and understanding that as wonderful as the document was, it wasn't perfect because it didn't protect individuals.
Okay, if you have to pick a musician, who are you going to put up there?
Oh, a musician? Wow. The favorite musician, I guess for me, it'd be somebody like Prince.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, somebody, and I obviously, that's an easy answer, right? When you're running in the district that contains Paisley Park. But Prince was inventive. He was talented. He knew where he was from. There are stories about the money he very quietly gave to Chanhassen Public Schools music program. Wildly inventive, quirky beyond all belief. But I wish someday I would have even just a moment of that creativity.
Yeah. Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't say Wellstone.
Yeah, I guess I
have
was
a
going
cold.
more. I was going more historical. Yep.
That's fair.
So Doug, would you rather have the power to be invisible whenever you want to, or the power to read people's minds?
Power to read people's minds, because I think it would allow you to understand how people are thinking. And I realize it's weird, right? I mean, they're both very intrusive. They're both eavesdropping or lurking in a way. But I guess I always try and imagine what somebody is thinking. Being able to actually know would be really helpful. I'm never going to be invited back anyway.
Would you rather walk 100 miles or swim 1 mile?
I'd rather walk 100 miles.
Same.
I'm a decent swimmer, but honestly, when you walk, you can see stuff. You can enjoy the view. It's not a race, right? I can imagine walking 100 miles, and meeting people and seeing things, and plus I could stop for a meal, which I probably can't really do if I'm swimming a mile. So
Fair.
Okay. Would you rather vacation in the mountains or by the ocean?
by the ocean.
Same.
Oh,
I've always loved the ocean. I love the mountains, but if I have to pick one, it's going to be the ocean.
well, come on out.
Yep. And honestly,
All
a
right, would
lake
you-
or a river will do just as well. I just like to be by the water.
We have
You know,
lots of those.
That was what was cool about living in New England, right? Because you could be in Boston and literally you're on Boston Harbor, and an hour and a half later you're up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. So that's what I miss about living in Minnesota. We're landlocked here, but
California's pretty nice for that too.
I don't know if you go up outside of Crosby in Cuyuna, they've got Miners Mountain where they piled up all the dirt that they dug. It's probably
not quite the same. I'm talking about like naturally
2,500
created.
feet high, Christy. I mean, you can see for a mile.
You're really selling it. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Would you rather be able to eat whatever you want without gaining weight or getting sick? Or would you rather be able to live without sleep?
I like to sleep, so I think I'd rather eat without gaining weight or getting sick. I know sleep is a necessity, but I think it's also a luxury. I think as we get older, especially once we become parents, we realize that it is a necessity, but it's also a really delicious luxury. So yeah, I would still want to sleep.
Cool.
I always think about what you could do though if you didn't need to sleep. Like if it wasn't a physical need, like how much more could you do?
Yeah, but there's like a finite amount of time and there's an infinite amount of food. So I think I would go for the infinite commodity if I were like choosing between the two. I don't know. That's my take on it.
That's cool, though. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, okay. And one more question to end this segment. Would you rather be the president of the United States or an inhabitant of a peaceful island community that has great infrastructure but has somehow never heard of the United States?
Wow.
I didn't write these questions. Monica did.
I think as a younger man, I would have wanted to be president. I think now living in a community that is well cared for would be really nice. I mean, and I'm now going to give you the politician's answer. I would love it if we could actually do both. If we could actually have the United States, as big as it is, function like an island that is well functioning, has good infrastructure, and doesn't have to worry about its reputation around the world.
Yeah.
We can dream. We
We can dream.
Would you invite a congressional candidate on? You were going to get the political answer at some
Right.
point.
Right.
So it's really your fault. Yeah.
Yeah. They closed Italian and Spanish airspace to U.S. military aircraft yesterday. And I did a post yesterday about this is akin to you taking a bat to your neighbor's flat screen and then being surprised when you show up at their front door and they've locked it and don't let you in their house. So,
Yep.
I mean, yeah, our neighbors and the rest of the world don't trust us anymore. We don't have a safe infrastructure and a well-running country right now. So, anyway. Well, Doug, you really are an election law geek, and we appreciate your time and commentary. We think this is just one of the many attributes that makes you a great candidate for public office. And we can't say enough good things about you. And it's been so fun to get to know you and be able to call you friend over the past few months. Why don't you share a little bit with our listeners about what you've been doing and find out more about how to support you?
Thanks. And as I'm fond of saying, me, you too. We've loved getting to know you guys. Campaign is going really well. We have gotten through the endorsement convention season coming up on DFL endorsement at the end of April. We're already making plans to pivot to the general election, knocking doors, raising money, getting ready to march in every parade we possibly can between now and November. Lots of opportunities to get involved. If you go to my website, chapinforcongress.com, you can learn more about us. You can learn about the issues. You can find out where we're going to be at the events tab. You can volunteer to do any number of different things to help us out at the volunteer tab. And of course, I'm constitutionally required to say you can hit that big red button and donate. Money isn't the only thing, but it does help campaigns like mine go. So if folks want to come and contribute money, time, effort, even just support on social media, that would be more than welcome.
And you're going to be present at our very first live event on April 13th at the Hook and Ladder in Minneapolis. We're so excited. Monica and I both went and took a tour of the venue, and we're like, this is the perfect place.
It's so fun and quirky.
Yeah. It's an old firehouse. So The inside, they've kept a lot of the infrastructure, but there are like stickers everywhere and like fuck ice stuff all over the place. There's a sign on the door saying if you're a federal agent, you may not come inside. I mean, they've got meaningful messages to the community outside. So yeah, it's going to be, and it's for a good cause. Project Do-Gooders Minnesota is doing so much good in the community and helping people who've been impacted by ICE enforcement. So we're excited to have you there. So
I'm just delighted to be considered an honorary chick for the night. So I'm looking forward to it.
We'll take you. We'll take you.
For sure. For sure.
And thanks for being here with us today, Doug. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
I want to remind people that America grew strong, not on the backs of our army or our industry, but on the backs of the people who actually believed in us and made it great. Your vote is a vital tool in doing that. Don't let anybody in the White House, on social media, anywhere, take that right away from you. I hope you'll vote for me, but if you don't, I hope you'll vote, because that is really what makes America different from so many places around the world.
Yeah, and we'll be posting links in the show notes to places where you can go check your voter registration as well. And we hope that this has given our listeners factual information that they can share with others who might have questions or worries about both the elections and the SAVE Act. In a time when media is compromised, it has never been more important to seek out accurate information.
If you're finding meaning in the stories we're sharing, if something moves you, challenges you, makes you see the world a little differently, please like, comment, and share. It helps more than you know.
And follow us everywhere at The Politics Chicks on Substack, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Thanks for being a part of our community. Keep shining your light so we can find each other in the dark.
And remember, we're stronger together. Thanks, Doug, for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And see you, everybody. Get your tickets for the event on the 13th. We'll see you live.
See y'all.